Good afternoon. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. It looks like we still have some people entering the room, so welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Gina Davis, and I am an education program specialist with the Department of Labor. We have a wonderful presentation this afternoon supporting the specialized needs of refugee students. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick tech overview. Throughout the presentation, there might be opportunities for comments or questions. You'll utilize the questions panel in order to respond to our lovely presenters. Before we get started though, I'm going to launch a quick poll so that we can see what your role is within the program. So if you can go ahead and choose one option for me, please, that would be wonderful. Okay, great. So everyone can see, as expected, we have a number of ESL instructors, a majority with us today. Probably some members from my team in the other panel there, some AB instructors and an instructional specialist, so that's fabulous. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Amber, and I hope everyone enjoys the presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, Gina. And thank you everyone for coming to our presentation, supporting the specialized needs of refugee students. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and we look forward on sharing ideas and collaborating. A little bit about us. My name is Amber Hengen. I have a MA Master of Arts degree in TSOL from UMBC. And I currently serve as the Refugee School Impact Coordinator with Baltimore City Community College.
And my name is Kirstin Thomas. I also have my master's in TSOL from UMBC, and I am an ESL and basic skills instructor. So, refugees, as many of you know, experience obstacles that can be separate from some of our mainstream English learners. And this comes from their position, having experienced trauma in their lives that caused them to flee their country. So today our goal is to look at the refugee experience a little bit, talk about some of those challenges that they face, and look at some resources, instructional ideas that can help you to meet those needs. Okay. So before we start, we're going to do a little poll, so you can answer these questions in the question box. We just want to get an idea of what you guys know and what you're interested in. So on a scale from 1, very little, to 5, a lot, we're wondering how much do you know about A, the refugee experience. This could be where they come from, what they do in the United States, some of the challenges they face. B, the 2-generation approach to policies and programming. Okay. C, Maryland community partners that support refugees. And D, classroom practices to support refugee learners. So you can just go ahead and type into the question box, for example, A, 5, if you feel that you know a lot about your refugee students. We'll give you a minute to respond. Okay, great. So Sheila Palmer is saying A to D, 1. So she is ready to learn a lot today. All right. Okay, we've got a couple 3s coming in. Okay. Some more 1s I'm seeing. And some 2s. Okay. So it looks like for most of us that are coming in, we don't know a whole lot about these things. So that's great that you're coming to the presentation today. We really hope that this will be insightful and helpful. And for those of you who do know something, you will have a chance to share some of your ideas as well.
Okay, thanks, Kirstin. So our objectives for this presentation, overall, our hope is that we'll be able to acquire new skills in meeting refugee EL needs. We also hope to obtain new perspectives and empathy to support learners. We're going to discuss the 2-gen model for whole family success. We'll understand the value of community partners and resources, And we're also hoping to identify teaching practices to increase student engagement and participation.
All right, so we'll just start with a little overview of refugee resettlements. Starting with the definition of refugee. A refugee is a person who must flee their country due to a well-founded fear of persecution. And this persecution could be because of war that's happening in their country. It could be because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in any ethnic or social group. Today, we find that the most common causes for refugees fleeing are due to war and tribal or religious violence. So refugee resettlement in the United States started in the 80s with the passing of the Refugee Act of 1980. And this took and created the definition of what a refugee was. And then it also created a process for us to be able to adjust and review how many refugees are coming into the country based on international emergencies, right? So currently 2/3 of refugees come from just 5 countries: Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, and Somalia. So you probably had students in your classrooms from these countries, and it's possible that these students were refugees or on a special immigrant visa. This chart that we have kind of shows you the history of refugee resettlement in the United States. When we started in 1980, we had over 220,000 refugees coming, and now we're at less than 20,000. So there's a trend. We'd like to see that trend turn around, hopefully, as we go forward. One other chart we thought was interesting and a good reminder. Until 2017, the United States was leading the rest of the world in refugee resettlement, sometimes settling more than twice all other countries combined in a given year. So we are a country with a history of helping and serving refugees, and again, we hope to continue that positive trajectory.
So moving on, as you can imagine, refugees experience a variety of challenges, both in their transition to the United States as well as in their resettlement here. A few challenges that I'd like to touch on relate to post-traumatic stress, limited formal education, resettlement, and cultural expectations about education. So looking at the first picture, which we see a diploma with an X through it, a common misconception is that refugees come to the US without any post-secondary education or college degree. And this really isn't correct in many cases. Refugees come to the US with degrees in the medical field, dentistry, engineering, software development, and legal studies, among other things. Another challenge that many refugee youth face when they arrive into the US is that they are a SLIFE, which is a student with limited or interrupted formal education. So in terms of getting acclimated to the US school system and public schools, many of our students, due to their experiences in their home country, which require them to seek the refugee status, it means that they often are out of school for extended periods of time. Another figure to look at with primary school, the UNHCR says that 91% of children around the world attend primary school, but only 50% of refugee children around the world attend primary school. And then looking at our last pictures towards the bottom, this relates to housing. And so with many refugees, when they first arrive to the US, they're resettled by the International Rescue Committee, which does a really great job of helping refugees integrate into communities that already exist to support refugees. And so a challenge for refugees, though, in finding alternate housing is often that when they come here, there isn't a history of employment. And so for many housing and apartment communities, they require maybe a pay stub or some other sign that the individual has steady income. And so this does limit where refugees are able to live. So a question that most people are asking at this time is, how is COVID impacting our refugee communities? So as you can imagine, in Baltimore City, there has been some challenges with lack of access to technology and the internet. Many of our families are or have experienced food insecurity in that many of our students are reliant on Baltimore City public schools to provide meals, free meals. And so kind of just that change in that routine has presented a challenge. Some of our families are dealing with unemployment, as is, most of the state in a way. They're losing their jobs, and so that can, cause some financial strain. And then, there has previously been lack of adequate access to academic resources. Some really great things that I can talk about that I know have happened more recently in the city is Baltimore City Community College has, for the past month now, been partnering with World Central Kitchen to offer meals, and thousands of meals have been distributed to families in and around Baltimore City. So that's really been a win. Additionally, there have been other nonprofits and city schools have stepped up to help provide devices, laptops for students to help access their classes online. And so those are just some things that have been happening kind of more recently that have been in response to COVID. And those are really some wins that we see. In terms of what's happened in the US, kind of broadly speaking, there's been a decrease in aid for refugees, increased exposure to COVID-19 kind of across the US for refugees. And then there has been, through the federal government, a temporary hold on refugee arrivals. So these are just a few ways towards the bottom of the slide. How can I support refugees in our community? One kind of piece of advice I have for you all is to take the time to maybe check out the Baltimore City Health Department and go to the link that says food sites. So if you click on food sites, there's actually a really great interactive map that would give you an overview of all of the free food and different meal delivery systems that are available in this city. So that would be something you can share out. You can also donate or get involved with Refugee Youth Project through the RYP Facebook page. My program that I operate under is called Refugee Youth Project, and we're continuing to serve students in the best way that we can during COVID. And so that would also be helpful to our program. And then finally, you could also volunteer. We have a partner organization called Soccer Without Borders, and they work with refugees, provide after-school programming, homework help, and they just provide holistic services for refugee families. So they're really a great resource as well.
Great, thank you, Amber, for sharing with that. So especially with COVID impacting our communities in such a way, the challenges that they were already facing are just exacerbated. So we really need to start thinking about how we can support those students in our classrooms. So in the next section, we're going to talk about a couple things. Amber's going to talk about the two-generation approach, which is approach to programming in colleges or community centers. And then she's also going to talk about community partnerships in Maryland that support our refugee learners. And then I will mention some classroom support strategies that I've used in my classroom and that I've been learning more about. And you guys will have an opportunity to share some strategies that you might have as well.
Okay, so taking a look at the two-generation approach. Before I get started, I did want to see in perhaps the questions box, who might be familiar with the two-generation approach. And so the question that I'd like for individuals to answer is how familiar do you feel with the two-generation approach? And I'll give you a few minutes. Okay, so it looks like some people are somewhat familiar, not so much. Some individuals have used it in planning. Some people have heard of the two-gen approach. Great. Okay. Thanks for your responses. So I'm just going to give a really brief overview of the 2-gen approach, and then I'll also explain how we see it implemented in our own program and what I do with the college. So the 2-gen approach and kind of the model that I'm looking at here is from the Ascend Aspen Institute. This is a nonprofit organization that's primarily located in DC, Washington, DC, and it supports initiatives and policies to help families and improve their economic security, health, and financial success. And so what they have defined the 2-gen approach as is focusing on research, being proactive, and focusing on policy. The 2-gen approach was launched in 1964 with Head Start, which is a federally funded programming, and it provides holistic services to children and families. In essence, 2-gen supports parents and other family members, facilitates stronger partnerships within the community among different service providers, and it supports human needs and financial needs for a family. So I added this particular picture here, the different gears, to just really touch on really the different elements of 2-gen, being social capital, early childhood education, post-secondary and employment pathways, health and well-being, and economic assets as well. So what I'll kind of be focusing more of my attention on is the post-secondary and employment pathways, and how the model that I work under is really a great example of how all of this fits into the 2-gen approach. Looking at 2-gen continued, there are different ways of approaching 2-generation, whether it's whole family, which kind of looks at outcomes for both children and adults, whether it takes more of a child-parent approach or parent-child approach. And you can read the presentation here and kind of get an idea for the difference between all three. The particular program that we operate under, I believe, has more of a whole family approach, looking at outcomes and successes for both the adults and children in a particular household. So looking at it at BCCC, I operate under the Department of English Language Services, which is under the Division of Workforce Development and Continuing Ed. Here we have a tree diagram in which I really separated our adult services from our youth programs. And so as you can see, we really provide a combination of both. We have the Refugee Assistance Program, which provides specialized free classes for refugees in and around Baltimore City. BCCC also offers citizenship classes, so anybody who's interested in taking the citizenship exam to prepare them for that. And then there are also classes offered under this department for services to older refugees, and these are classes that support older refugees and provide resources to older refugees. Looking at youth programs, my particular program, Refugee Youth Project, provides after-school, out-of-school time programming and support with college readiness. We operate at the K through 12 level with particular, I would say, focus on academic advancement and social adjustment in school. Along the same line of youth programming, we have the Mayor's Scholars Program, and this is a, and I suggest anybody who might know about it, please share out with anybody in your community. The Mayor's Scholars Program offers tuition assistance, so students receive free tuition from Baltimore City Community College in order to attend. And so there's really a simple application process when a student applies online to BCCC. They click Mayor's Scholars Program, and it's part of the Maryland Community College Promise. So BCCC Language ESL, ELS, uses a 2-gen approach in meeting unique academic and ESL needs of refugees in and around Baltimore City through offering classes and activities which are aimed at meeting varied needs of diverse age groups. So this is just an example of how 2-gen might be implemented at BCCC or maybe even other partner community colleges, similar colleges. So in this case, we have a family, and we have maybe a father and a mother and a son, and we might have grandparents as well. And with many of our refugee families, this is a common household where the parents and children come to the US along with grandparents. And so in this case, all of the individuals in this household have access to student support services, testing, and advising, but they all might have unique pathways and supports to help them meet their academic and personal goals. So in this case, with this father, he might be looking to take CESL, which are free community-based ESL classes. And this might be to help him with his conversational English, or just to improve the English that he currently has. And from there, he might apply to and participate in adult basic education, or GED. Maybe he wants to receive his GED, and that would then make him eligible for a cybersecurity certificate. And so that might be his pathway. Maybe we have a youth in the household who is eligible to participate in Refugee Youth Project, and from there, maybe he'll apply to the Mayor Scholars Program, and he'll attend BCCC as a credit student. Another situation might be an individual, in this case the mother, who she maybe is interested in receiving an Associate of Science degree at Baltimore City Community College. And so she would participate in ELI, which is our credit-bearing classes. And she would transfer those credits to her degree in biotechnology. Looking at maybe the grandparents, maybe we have an individual who's interested in citizenship, applying for citizenship. Or maybe we have another individual who is interested in participating in services for older refugees. And so, as you can see in this model, there really are services and classes that are meant to really help the varied needs of students and make sure that everybody is served collectively in an entire family. So, kind of leading into community partnerships and resources, the question is always, well, how do we provide two-generation services? Two-generation often requires such varied skill sets, and we're looking at health, we're looking at financial security, we're looking at language and education, and so there are all of these different kind of elements to help support a family on a two-generation level. How do we do that? And realistically, what is really critical in having really a positive and an effective two-gen model is relying on community partnerships and resources. Here I have an example of our own community partnerships and resources that serve refugees in and around Baltimore City. So these are a few that I'm very familiar with. Feel free to reach out to these organizations. There are quite a few content experts in these different fields that could really help if you need resources for your students, or just you have some questions about the refugee experience. My particular program is called the Refugee Youth Project, and as mentioned, we provide the out-of-school time portion and activities for academic advancement and social adjustment. Our partner, Soccer Without Borders, provides team building skills, mentorship, and they also oversee a summer school program at the K-8 level. The International Rescue Committee, you may be familiar with their work. They work on a global level, but in Baltimore, the way that we collaborate with them is through case management. They help us with school enrollment, and they really do provide that initial resettlement support for families, whether it be housing, financial assistance, employment. So they're really a great resource for refugees as well. And then Baltimore City Public Schools, or county, so the public school system. And as you probably are familiar, they provide K-12 academic programs, provide college and career preparedness, and then the core academic and English language skills development. And so these are all programs that serve refugees kind of in different ways, with different expertise, but all serving kind of holistically meeting the needs of refugees. And this is a really great graphic that Kirstin developed, and as you can see, it's just kind of reiterating the fact that all of these organizations are all collectively working towards meeting a family's needs. Okay, so a few other additional resources that I just wanted to share that I'm familiar with and I do feel would be really valuable for ESL instructors if you're looking for research, lesson plan material, or if you're just looking for contacts to connect with. Links is one example of a resource we have. BRICS, Bridging Refugee Youth and Children's Services, LIRS, the TSOL International Association, Switchboard, Migration Policy Institute, or Catholic Charities. I highly suggest any of these resources, and I think that, yeah, they would be really valuable for lesson plan development or just kind of expanding on your knowledge of refugees and the refugee experience. I pulled up a few resources just to give you kind of a, I guess, more of a thorough overview of how they might be helpful. So this is from the Migration Policy Institute, and this particular article is about COVID. It's a very relevant article, and basically it touches on the fact that refugees are a population that is that really does have the background and education in healthcare, and so considering the fact that there's such a shortage of healthcare workers, there could be the possibility or the potential for refugees to really enter that sector, considering our current times. And so this is just so relevant in terms of just research that can also help shape classes and programs as we move forward with COVID. Another resource that I really have loved and I've gotten to know many of the individuals who are part of this is International TSOL, and if you join International TSOL, you have the option to join different intersections. And so under International TSOL's intersections board, there's an intersection called Refugee Concerns, and as you can see here, it's kind of set up as like a blog post, but there's a library of resources, there's a discussion board, there's members, so that way you can network with individuals. But this is also a really great way to just learn about kind of cutting edge research in refugee concerns, and also sharing ideas or maybe asking questions, and people can actually comment on the discussion board. So it's just a really great community to be a part of. And finally, BRICS, as mentioned earlier, I just pulled this from the BRICS website, and this is actually a toolkit for working with refugees and communities and immigrants in the community. And so here we have resources and we have different basically lesson plans that have already been developed to help refugees and to just kind of support your implementation of instruction to refugees in the classroom. Some other last kind of minute professional learning circles and resources. Maryland TSOL, I serve on the board of Maryland TSOL as well as Kirstin, and this is really a great opportunity for individuals if you join Maryland TSOL or if you're interested in joining the board. This has just such a wealth of information and so many talented people to learn from. That I, as somebody who's newer to the field, have been really grateful to rely on. So if you're interested in joining Maryland TSOL, getting more resources, just feel free to join. You may also be familiar with COAID, MACE, or the American Association of Community Colleges, Pro Literacy. And I'm a member of a number of these organizations. I'm not going to say how many because then I'll know how much I've spent on memberships, but between articles and resources and newsletters, I mean, there's just so much information here that I've really benefited from. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber, for sharing some of those resources. And I just am noticing a question that's coming in saying, how will I find out what refugee programs are available in Southern Maryland? I know a lot of them that you mentioned work in Baltimore, but I believe some of them are in the state, correct?
Yeah, so there are refugee programs located throughout the state of Maryland. If the individual, I can't actually see the question. I'm trying to navigate this go-to.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I can definitely get the email address for this individual. I would be more than happy to share the resources that I do have, or also give a referral for a staff member I might know at the IRC who could maybe connect you with somebody in Southern Maryland who is familiar with the refugee work in Southern Maryland. So yeah, sure, that would be no problem. And I do actually see the email address, so I'll write that down.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber.
Sure.
So our next section, I'm going to talk a little bit about some classroom support strategies that I've used and you've probably used as well. And then we can talk a little bit more about your ideas regarding that. And I do want to mention that most of these strategies are ones that you could apply to either children or adults. So depending on where you're working or who you're working with at the time, you can modify these to be more appropriate for the age group. Okay, so my first tip, remember that students may be under a lot of stress. All of us, I think, do this. You know, as ESL teachers, we are empathetic, we care about what our learners are going through, but because individuals who have experienced trauma may have additional stress, it may cause them to act in unexpected ways. So really, like, knowing where your student is coming from and having an idea of the source of their stress can maybe help you avoid triggering situations or language that might not be appropriate. So I think, you know, getting to know our students, of course, and getting to understand what they're going through is essential in order to be able to meet their needs. And some of those needs, like I say, help students and families find the resources they need. You might find out that, you know, your student is experiencing a food shortage in their household, or they need help with employment. So as we always do, you know, help our students and families find the resources they need. And if you, you know, don't feel that you have the resource, you can turn to your program administrators and they can help you get those resources to share with your students. I know in some of my more intermediate ESL classes, we've made brochures with community resources. That's always a good way to kind of address any community needs that students might have without singling out any individuals. Okay. My next tip, integrate the students' cultural and country information. Again, a lot of us find ways to do this. Working from my position in adult education, I often am just looking to get people to share their own experiences and what's normal for them in their country, to really validate that, you know, their experience is valid, it's normal, and that we can incorporate that into our own classrooms. And if any of you have ideas about how to increase this, I would love to hear more, because this is something that I personally want to work more on. So using the buddy system, this works great with adults or with children. Just finding somebody who shares the same language, preferably the same culture or country, would be great, you know, because just, again, giving them an opportunity to find support within their own community and individuals who may have a similar understanding or be in a similar place to them. So that just helps build a community and a sense of support among your learners. Okay. Talking with students about topics that interest them, right? So again, something that many of us do. I read a tip that said, try to dedicate 3 minutes of your day to just talking about non-academic or non-language related or need related topics. And once you have an idea of things that students interest you, of course, it helps to integrate that into your curriculum. And you can also share that information with other teachers so that they can have some of that knowledge in helping their students, right? Promoting learner agency, this is a big thing. An agency includes, you know, the worth that we feel for ourselves. The better we feel about ourselves, the more able we are to accomplish what we set out to do. And so sometimes teachers might think that it's appropriate to set lesser expectations for their refugee students given the stress that they're undergoing, but it's actually the opposite. You should be setting the same high expectations for them, with the idea being that they are capable, they can do what everybody else in the classroom can do, And so not singling them out for their status by lessening the expectations you might have. And of course, we want to set reasonable expectations, but you shouldn't be lowering them just because of a student's, what you perceive as the trauma or experience that they've gone through. And creating predictability with daily routines and visual schedules. Beyond having your objectives on the board, it's helpful for students who have never had educational experiences to understand what they're supposed to do when they enter the classroom, when they leave the classroom. Is it appropriate to talk when the teacher is talking? They may not know or understand or not be sure what to do. So if you can develop routines or visual aids to help learners figure out the answers to these things, it can be very helpful in them forming a comfortable environment. Okay, my last strategies that I looked at, and this is something that I've been trying to do more, is teaching learners to change the channel from negative thinking. So this could be doing some breathing exercises or meditation or mindfulness exercises. Again, depending on the age of the students, you might need to adjust those. But especially with adults, they come to the classroom after a long day and they just might need a minute to just reflect and to be. And so to not be always pushing to do more, but to take a moment to breathe and to meditate and help them find ways to maybe distract from everything that they're going through, I think can be kind of helpful, right? And lastly, giving supportive feedback, something we all do, but something I was thinking about is using a positive sandwich approach to giving feedback on an assignment. So you might say, you did a great job on this essay. I'm noticing just a small spelling error here and there, but overall, it's an excellent essay and your point is really clear. So making sure that it doesn't come out, as a needle at them, pointing out the negative. You want to be able to really be focusing on the positive work that they do. And I saw a question from somebody saying, I know there's a lot of sensitivity around documentation issues with students. Since these programs are targeted at refugees, I'm wondering if asking about refugee status is appropriate or if it falls under the same privacy or sensitivity issue as documentation status. And I would say, and I can be wrong, so if others want to share their opinion, I would say that it is appropriate to ask your students or know about their refugee status. It's not quite the same sensitivity as being undocumented, and that your program should be able to provide you that information, and that will help you then to identify, where did they come from? Were they fleeing war, religious violence? I think that can be helpful to really pin down what areas of stress they might be experiencing. Amber, do you feel the same or?
So I would say that we partner, and this is how community partnerships can be really valuable to different education-facing programs. So we partner with the IRC, International Rescue Committee, and they offer that resettlement and support. And so under my particular program, I operate under the Refugee School Impact Grant. And we're provided, there really is a data sharing agreement that's been established between my program and the IRC to be able to accomplish our grant goals through just understanding individual students' refugee status. And so if I were you, my maybe suggestion would be to reach out obviously to records and registration at your particular your particular school, but also my assumption would be that there is probably some type of data sharing agreement in place if you are knowingly serving refugees, and so that would be my suggestion. It probably varies depending on the program as to what type of agreements are in place, but if you have documented evidence that an individual is a refugee, then I would assume that there is some type of agreement there between your program and a resettlement agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. There is the data sharing agreement there, and like if you're working in a program that is targeted specifically at refugees, like in my experience, they've shared that information with me. But I guess if you weren't sure, you probably would want to check with your program provider, right? Great, thank you. So anybody else have any other strategies or ideas that they would like to share with us, or ideas about how to integrate culture into your classrooms? I would love to hear about that. We'll give you a minute to respond. I know sometimes you have an idea that might take a little time to type, so I'll give you a minute.
Thank you, ladies. And as we're waiting for that, I just put a feedback survey in the chat form or in the chat box. I see, Amber, that you posted one, but I'll give you what they give me, so no worries. If everyone can take a moment to do that for me. And I do see a couple of things coming in here, so I will keep quiet as that goes on, but thank you guys so much.
Sure, thank you.
Oh, I'm seeing one. Okay. Letting students role play cultural experiences here to help other students know what to expect. That's a really, really great idea. Yeah, absolutely. Giving them an opportunity to role play a situation within our culture, how it might be different for them so they can familiarize themselves before they get there. That's a great thought. Thank you. See, I'm scrolling through. Anything else? Let's see.
I guess I could also maybe follow up with asking, are there any other questions? Maybe we could receive contact information from individuals if there's anything else that people still are interested in knowing about, and then maybe we could find the right individuals to direct them to.
Okay, so I just put your email address in the chat box for them. So anybody who does have outstanding questions or doesn't feel comfortable asking in this arena, you're welcome to just contact Amber directly. And Amber, can you just verify that I put the right thing in there?
Sure, I'm not sure I can.
Under the chat panel, ahengen@bccc.edu, is that correct?
Correct, AHENGEN at
Okay,
bcc.edu. Perfect.
Okay, great, great, great.
Oh, I'm seeing a few more questions coming in. It says, do the refugee population have a hierarchical knowledge of basic emotional and academic needs? I think that what this image was showing is just that our basic emotional academic needs all are part of what creates a successful opportunity for students. And so depending on the individual and their situation, you might want to address more than one aspect of these. And that would be, of course, a matter of getting comfortable and knowing your student enough to be able to provide that support.
And again, leaning on community partners to help provide anything outside of maybe the academic arena, or just any other ways that you might be looking to help support your student.
I see here's a comment too that says discuss how students have dealt with prejudice that they've experienced. Okay, so that could be a good idea, especially maybe in a more advanced or adult education classroom, to maybe look at issues of cultural difficulty. If that was referring to like cultural elements, that's something I think is great. Right? And just to support them, of course, because of everything that they're going through, and that they're course, are experiencing probably discrimination and other forms of injustice too.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time and your experience and your expertise on the topic. I certainly have learned a lot today, so I appreciate your sharing. As I mentioned, take a moment to complete the feedback survey that I put in the chat box. All content and requests for proof of participation can be found on the Virtual Training Institute website, where you did sign up for the sessions that you had today and any other day. But if you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. But I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And thank you again, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.